I do remember I have a 22-year-old, and I do remember when he was little, he was raised in a Montessori environment early in life, and Montessori is very factual,
Mm.
very real, very like fact-based.
Yeah.
And so they also taught us as parents, like, don't talk about birds and bees. If you're going to talk about reproduction, you talk about humans.
Hmm.
And so I remember early on having these conversations with my kid and joking about it. And him saying like birds and bees. And I remember telling him, yes. So there was a little bird that met a bee and they came together, started kissing, and then they had intercourse, and then they had a bird bee. And
That's the
he's
birds and the bees
well,
talk?
no, that's not the birds and
Oh,
bees,
okay.
but I told him that, and he started laughing. And he was, I mean, because he was imagining this bird and this bee and having a bird that looks like a bee. And so I made it a joke,
Mhm.
but that was my preempt to say, we don't talk about birds and bees. We talk about human beings. And so I always told him like how things worked. So how do you approach the conversation? Number one, you name body parts in the way they were intended to be named. And so that's the first. When people say, well, you start the conversation at 3, or you start the conversation when they ask. No, you actually start the conversation when they're born. And you say, this is your vulva. This is your penis. These are your testicles, your scrotum. And obviously at that point, yeah, it's not going to necessarily make sense, but you're teaching them, these are your eyes. This is your
Yeah.
nose. This is your mouth. But you're not teaching them how these parts are
Mm.
actually named. And you have euphemisms for them. So you have maybe like, oh, that's your little teeny weeny, and that's your little cookie. And or whatever the name you use. And so that is very dangerous,
Mm.
very detrimental to kids.
Is it because you're not giving them the language to address and also just acknowledge and accept these parts of their bodies?
All of the above. So you are, first of all, you are creating this aura, this
Mm. This
mystique.
haze.
Yes, so there's like a veil. So we say, what is it, head, shoulders, knees, and toes? And we teach everything else, but we don't
But this is just a
teach
blur.
that. Exactly. So that starts sending the message that there is something
Mm.
odd, something may be wrong.
Something taboo, maybe.
Yes, exactly. We don't
Mhm.
talk about that. And so also, if you do and you start using names that are not proper, and I've heard arguments from parents saying, oh, if I teach my kid that that's a penis, first of all, he will say it in school. I'm like, yeah, well, that's the right name for it. We don't have another name. I mean, we have phallus. You can teach them phallus, but I don't know if anybody will understand. But anyway, so that's the proper name that we have for the human penis, for that reproductive organ. And it's supposed to be okay to use that word in school out of all places. And also, if you don't name them properly, that puts them in danger for advocating for themselves if something ever happens. And there is this story, I don't want to be kind of the bearer of bad news here, but this is actually a real story. And I think it came from a teacher. I read it many years ago. And it was that this girl came to the classroom, and she was like in a very low grade, maybe uh, kindergarten or something. She was very young. And she came into the classroom and said, my father ate my cookie today. And this is, I know this is very hard to swallow, but I am not trying to do anything except for stating the facts. So the teacher said, oh, that's okay.